The day I took the job at the Hensley residence. The late October wind carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. The address led me to a quiet neighborhood in the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio, where large houses stood far apart, their lawns perfectly trimmed but eerily silent. The Hensley home was beautiful in a faded kind of way. White paint peeling near the windows, a cracked driveway, and a large oak tree shedding its last golden leaves. I remember clutching my medical bag tighter as I rang the bell. The door swung open almost immediately. A man in his early 30s stood there, tall, broad-shouldered and visibly tense. His gray eyes met mine with suspicion before he spoke. "You're the new nurse?" he asked, flatly. I nodded. "Follow me. Don't touch anything unless I say so." His tone was clipped, military-like, as if I were an intruder rather than a caregiver. I followed him down a narrow hallway, lined with family photos, a smiling man with thick hair, and a strong jawline in most of them. That must have been Mr. Hensley before the accident. When we entered the bedroom, my heart sank. Mr. Hensley lay motionless in a motorized hospital bed, tubes and wires surrounding him like a mechanical web. The faint sound of his ventilator filled the air with steady, haunting breaths. His eyes flickered toward me, and though he couldn't move, I could feel his warmth, a quiet gratitude beneath the machines. "Hello, Mr. Hensley," I said softly, adjusting the blankets. His lips tried to form a smile. Behind me, Derek, his son, cleared his throat impatiently. "He communicates with the board," he said, pointing to a letterboard on the tray. "Don't expect small talk. He gets tired easily." I wanted to ask questions, but his coldness made it clear I wasn't welcome to. That first evening, I prepared the medications, cleaned the room, and checked vitals. Each time I turned, I could feel Derek's eyes on me from the doorway, as if waiting for me to make a mistake. By the time I left, the moon had risen over the quiet neighborhood. I sat in my car, staring at the house. The job paid well, but something about that place felt heavy, like secrets hung in the air thicker than the disinfectant. I told myself it was just nerves, but deep down I knew there was more to this family than what I had seen. The second week at the Hensley house began with a creeping sense of unease. I'd settled into a rhythm: morning vitals, medication checks, light exercises for circulation, and long silences broken only by the hum of medical machines. Mr. Hensley had grown comfortable with me. He'd spell short words on the letterboard: pain, thanks, sund. Each word felt like a fragile bridge between us. But Derek's presence loomed constantly. He never smiled, barely ate, and often paced the hallway at night while talking on the phone in a hushed but furious tone. I tried to ignore it, but every conversation seemed to end the same way, with him slamming a door and muttering under his breath. One evening, as a storm brewed outside, thunder rolling through the Ohio sky, I was in Mr. Hensley's room replacing his 4 fluids. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was oddly calming. Then, without warning, the door burst open. Derek stood there, soaked from the rain, eyes blazing with anger. "What did you do?" he shouted. I froze mid-motion. "What are you talking about?" He strode over to the cabinet, yanked open the drawers, and held up an empty medicine box. 2 vials of oxycodone are missing. They were here this morning. I felt the blood drain from my face. "I didn't touch them," I said, my voice trembling. "Check the chart. I've logged every dose." But Derek wasn't listening. His jaw tightened and his voice dropped to a low growl. "I've seen people like you. Nurses who think they can take advantage of helpless patients." His words cut deep. Before I could respond, Mr. Hensley's monitor beeped rapidly. His eyes darted between us, wide and frightened. I immediately turned my attention to him, adjusting his oxygen levels and checking his pulse. Derek just stood there, his fists clenched, his chest heaving with unspoken rage. When the tension broke, it was quiet again, except for the rain against the window. "If you're lying to me," Derek said finally, his voice trembling with something that sounded almost like desperation, "you'll regret ever stepping foot in this house." And he stormed out. I wanted to quit right then, but when I looked at Mr. Hensley, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes, I couldn't. "Please," he mouthed weakly, "don't go." And in that fragile moment, I understood that the real pain in this house wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, buried in secrets I hadn't yet uncovered. It was close to midnight when everything began to unravel. The Hensley home was silent except for the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator and the soft ticking of a wall clock. Rain tapped against the windows, steady and cold. I was finishing paperwork in the kitchen when a faint alarm pierced. The high-pitched beeping of Mr. Hensley's oxygen monitor. My heart lurched. I sprinted down the hallway, my shoes slipping on the polished wood. When I entered the bedroom, the sight froze me. The oxygen line was disconnected, not loose but cut. The tubing dangled from the side of the machine, sliced cleanly through. Mr. Hensley's chest was barely moving, his eyes wild with panic. My hands moved on instinct. I grabbed a spare line from the drawer, reconnected it, and restarted the flow. The machine hissed back to life and color slowly returned to his face. He blinked twice, the signal we used for a yes. I whispered, "You're okay. You're safe now." Suddenly, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Derek burst in, barefoot, his t-shirt soaked with sweat. "What happened?" he shouted, his voice cracking. I turned to face him, my breath shaky. "The line was cut, Derek. Someone tried to exit. He didn't let me finish." His eyes darted toward the broken window on the far side of the room. The curtain was fluttering in the wind, shards of glass scattered across the floor. Muddy footprints trailed from the window to the hallway. Derek's face went pale. He grabbed a baseball bat from behind the dresser and ran toward the door. "Call 911, he yelled. I did, my fingers trembling as I relayed the situation. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights painted the walls. Police officers swept through the house, their radios crackling, boots crunching over glass. As the chaos unfolded, a detective pulled Derek aside. I overheard fragments, debt collectors' threats, money owed. It all started making sense. Derek hadn't been angry at me. He'd been terrified. After his father's accident, medical bills had buried them both. Desperate, he'd borrowed money from people who didn't forgive late payments. Those same men had come tonight to send a message when the police finally left. I found Derek sitting at the dining table, his hands shaking, eyes hollow. "You think I'm a monster," he said quietly, "but I've just been trying to keep him alive, and for the first time, I believed him." 3 weeks had passed since the break-in, and the Hensley house no longer felt like the same place. The broken window had been replaced. The police had come and gone, and a quiet calm had returned, but beneath that calm, something had changed. Derek wasn't the cold, hostile man I'd met on my first day. He was exhausted, humbled, and for the first time open. The walls he'd built around himself had begun to crack, revealing someone far more human than I ever expected. Each morning now, Derek helped with his father's care, sometimes holding the suction tube for me, sometimes reading aloud from old architectural magazines. His father's eyes followed every word, glimmering with pride. "He designed that one," Derek said one afternoon, pointing to a glossy photo of a glass-fronted office tower in downtown Cleveland. "The firm said they named it after him, but they never did." His voice softened. "He worked himself to death for them." There were still moments of tension, but the house no longer felt haunted by anger. Derek began brewing coffee in the mornings, and he'd bring me a cup during my night shifts. Sometimes he'd apologize, not with words, but with gestures. Replacing a light bulb I mentioned was out, fixing the leaky sink, leaving an extra blanket by my chair. I noticed how carefully he looked after his father now, wiping his face, adjusting his pillow with quiet tenderness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and violet, Derek sat beside his father's bed and opened a small leather-bound journal. "He used to write ideas here," he explained, flipping through sketches and notes. "After the accident, I read them whenever I miss who he was." His father blinked slowly, his breathing steady. Derek's voice wavered as he continued. "I thought I lost him that night, but may I just stop listening?" I stood in the doorway, feeling tears sting my eyes. This man, the one I'd called a monster, was nothing more than a son drowning in fear and guilt, doing everything he could to hold his father's world together. When Derek looked up and met my gaze, I nodded softly. "You never stopped caring," I said. Outside, the wind rustled through the oak tree, scattering leaves across the porch. Inside, for the first time since I arrived, the house didn't feel sad anymore. It felt like healing.